9 years ago, the Permanent Court of Arbitration under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea delivered a landmark ruling in the Philippines' favor on disputed claims in the West Philippine Sea. The ruling effectively clarified issues, narrowed disputed areas, invalidated China's 9-dash line and historical claims, and defined maritime features in the also contested Spratly Islands. Until today, China refuses to honor this ruling. Tensions continue to escalate, with Beijing accusing the Philippines of provocation. Marking the anniversary, the Department of National Defense reaffirmed its commitment to uphold the 2016 ruling. Secretary Gilbert Teodoro also said the arbitral ruling is a simple yet powerful reminder that the rule of law matters, especially in the face of harassment. Teodoro stressed that under the ruling, defending the country's sovereign rights and jurisdiction is not an act of provocation, but a sacred and fundamental duty of the Republic and a responsibility to the nation. And we welcome tonight's guest back to our studio, maritime security expert and director of Sea Light Gordian Knot Center for National Security Innovation at Stanford University. Hello and good evening, Ray. Welcome back to the program. You delivered a speech earlier at the annual commemoration of the arbitral ruling on China's disinformation. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
So usually I talk about maritime things. I track ships, of course. Yeah. But over the past couple of years, I have collected these accusations, mostly against me and Sea Light. Depending on whom you ask, I'm either part of the military-industrial complex, or I'm a CIA agent, or and so over a period of time, I started comparing the messages that were coming out of China's own state media to some of the ones that would appear in certain Philippine publications as op-eds and those kinds of things. And, wow, these are really similar. And to go, to the point that there was one that was put in the Global Times, China's state media, and one put in the Manila Standard that were, and frankly, in many ways, virtually identical by two different authors in two different newspapers in two different countries.
You would attribute that to China?
Look, it's one of two things. Either the Manila Standard, Rod Kapunan, was a very bad plagiarist, or it was a coordinated effort to put the same content in two different publications.
What was the content?
It was essentially, it was around the time that Lloyd Austin and Secretary Blinken came to the Philippines, and it was essentially saying that this is going to provoke China, and this is all being organized and orchestrated by Ray Powell, and it was a lot of the same things. It was just the very interesting thing was they were produced about 4 days apart, and again the content was just stunningly similar.
Because this is what Senator Tolentino had been saying in many of his Senate hearings.
Yeah.
And eventually got him barred from the country. But what are the other incidents of disinformation?
Well, so, I mean, this is the messaging that really Beijing has been pushing is kind of typical of what we've seen, and it goes in conjunction with the gray zone activity. China wants the Philippines to accept that there's just really no resisting China, that any effort to push back is its own provocation, that the United States is here as an outside agitator, and that if
that's the storyline.
That's the narrative, yes. And so I seem to fit very conveniently into this narrative because, in case you didn't notice, I am American, and I am a former military officer, and so I think they've sort of picked up on me as a convenient way to sell this story.
Okay, Ray, over the last 9 years, this information has gotten more and more prevalent, I suppose is the word. Even today, I saw a post by Huang Xilian, and he was saying that, we did it first. We occupied islands in the Spratlys in the 70s. I'm not sure if you saw that post.
So I didn't see it. Look,
but you're familiar with it.
Well, I mean, so it's true, there was an island scramble back in the 70s and 80s. Lots of countries were sort of occupying features. That's never, been at issue. So that's why when I first started studying the South China Sea in the late 80s, what we were all worried about was who had their flag planted on which feature. What's different today than back then is that we've never seen somebody try to control all the water before. And that's what China is now doing. So it's not just that they have their flag on this feature and the Philippines has one on this feature and Vietnam has one on that feature. It's that they are beginning to create exclusion zones and trying to keep the Philippines away from certain things that it considers sensitive.
Okay. Toward the end of that post of Huang Xilian, he did say he favored a bilateral mechanism instead of talking it over, instead of the UNCLOS, which they are, of course, as we all know, they are a signatory to.
So China has sort of taken UNCLOS and said, yeah, we signed up to that, but of course you can't possibly mean within the 9-dash line because everybody knows that belongs to China. Well, that's pretty much why UNCLOS exists, is to keep somebody from doing that. So what the arbitral award did was it basically came in and said, no, if you apply UNCLOS the way it's written, it is clearly, and it scopes out exactly, the 9-dash line means nothing. And China knew that's what the conclusion had to be, which is why they just said, we're not participating.
So is a bilateral mechanism that is in effect now between Manila and Beijing, is that just all like a waste of...
No, I mean, you have to do those things, but I think what you have to realize is one reason that China really likes bilateral mechanisms is they can walk in as the large power, and the Philippines walks in as the smaller power, and they believe they can get more of what they want that way.
Well, Ray, I mean, the prevailing question is, why is China not just, honoring this arbitral ruling, right, 9 years on? And I believe you had a conversation with Defense Secretary Gibot Teodoro about that. And we actually have this clip, so let's listen to this.
I think China's actions have been the strongest factor for convergence against it. And might I say that I sort of feel that their leadership will owe their people a big responsibility in the future for their actions, and it is due to the actions of symbolically one person, Xi Jinping, and his autocratic rule of a monolithic party, which Chinese people have no choice but to follow.
Well, strong statements there coming from Secretary Teodoro.
He does not mince words. Yeah. He is careful in what he says, but he is strong in what he says. And I mean, I really think this is kind of unarguable. China has succeeded by its aggression over the last several years especially in creating a block of nations against it, which is the one thing that it says that it hates, right? So, if you go back 3 or 4 years, then this part of the world might have seemed kind of obscure to a lot of people in the West and in other places. Now they're looking out and they're seeing increasing alignment between the Philippines, of course the United States, but also Japan and Australia.
There were 12 ambassadors in attendance earlier. That should say how much cooperation we are getting and support.
And so China has created the monster that they were trying to avoid simply by the means of their aggression. Look, and the Philippines played such a crucial part in that whole thing because the Philippines did a very, very simple thing. It turned on the cameras.
Well, Ray, you pointed out that China will also never agree to a legally binding code of conduct unless they're the ones setting the terms.
Right.
So at this point, do you believe the Philippines has any leverage? I mean, what would be a strategic alternative to that? Is it to isolate Beijing and form this coalition with other like-minded nations?
I believe that the Philippines is actually playing this very well. Understanding they have a very large and aggressive power that is essentially carrying out an occupation of the West Philippine Sea in many ways. So there are large parts of the West Philippine Sea that are becoming inaccessible to the Philippines. For example, Scarborough Shoal is essentially they have basically an exclusion zone around Scarborough Shoal. So when you have an occupying force, the best thing to do is be patient, right? Because occupations wear out when the occupier eventually starts asking themselves, why are we doing this? What is this gaining us, right? Okay, so we control a lot of water, so what? And meanwhile, what we're doing is we're uniting the world against us. We're creating for ourselves all kinds of economic and other diplomatic and other political problems. And by the way, we have other things to worry about. So essentially, I mean, this is how occupations end.
We wear them out.
You do, and it's a little frustrating, right? It's frustrating from the part of the occupied, country. But I mean, look at India, right? Mahatma Gandhi basically carried out a decades-long, peaceful, a nonviolent protest against the British occupation, right? It took decades.
Yeah.
But they were successful in the end. And eventually they wore the British out. The British looked around and they say, why are we doing this?
We've also seen changes, though, in the 9 years since the arbitral award. We saw Japan now willing to get into the fray, sort of, still guarded in their own
And recently being harassed by China,
Also,
the
yes.
planes of the self-defense force
Yes.
of Japan.
Yeah.
and Senkaku. And then today, at your forum, India announced that they want to do joint patrols as well. That's unheard of. We also know they have kind of a tiff with China at their border. And Australia, again, pledged, I think, over $100 million worth of equipment.
Yeah, and so why, and if you look out there, it's not like everybody suddenly has more money or more capability that they have to spread around. They're focused in on the Philippines because what they've seen is, one is the Philippines is willing to stand up and work with them, and two, the Philippines is where the need is, right? So if when they look around and they think, well, we could give our money over here, but here's where it could be really effective.
So we're doing it right this time.
So okay, this is Ray Powell's opinion. I really do think so, and you could certainly
Because we don't have the money for defense, so this is the right way. Just
I mean, that goes back to my conversation with Secretary Teodoro. We talked about what did he essentially want his legacy to be. And he said, look, when we finally turn it over to the next group that comes in, I want them to think that we have helped to create the outlines of a credible deterrent. And he used that word several times, a credible deterrent. Because in the end, what you want is a large power like China to look at the Philippines and say, yeah, I could push them around, but there's risk there, and it's not worth the risk. And in order to do that, you have to be able to present them with something that's going to be
because
risky
we have
for
all
them.
these allies behind us.
The allies, and of course, if you are able to, say, bring in mid-range missiles, for example, if you're able to increase the number of fighter aircraft, if you're able to bring, he really would like to get air warning and control system aircraft, AWACS aircraft, and air refueling aircraft. So these are things that he would like to see. But again, those plus that network of allies and partners that begins to make the Philippines look like a much harder target.
Right.
But if we zoom in on the ASEAN, we're kind of the outlier there, right? And you know that, Ray.
I do. Yeah.
Tell us more about our position in the ASEAN where we're standing alone, and most of our ASEAN neighbors are actually on China's side.
What I said today at the forum was I think that the Philippines' role in ASEAN is to be ASEAN's backbone. There are, various degrees of squishiness around ASEAN, and look, every country in the end acts in its own national interest. That's not new. I'm not breaking any big story here, right? That's what countries do. And so, countries that are further away from China, who have maybe less of those acute issues that the Philippines has, are able to sort of step back and say, we can sort of let the Philippines flounder on their own. Okay, sure. So you're not going to get the kind of support you're getting from Japan and Australia and even India from the ASEAN countries. Okay. But it's good that somebody in ASEAN is standing up and somebody shows up at the ASEAN meetings and says, look, we are a member of this organization and we are being harassed. We are being pushed around. Somebody needs to say that, and that seems to be the Philippines' role.
Okay, we now are showing the slide presentation you made earlier about Chinese disinformation, because I guess they are approaching this on a multi-pronged dimension. You know, disinformation, you have the harassment, you have the flights, etc.,
Yeah.
island building. Okay.
And so, look, I went through and I said, look, here are the messages that are coming out of the Beijing, their state media, and then here are some of these Philippine voices that are saying essentially the same things. And then I went through and I talked about those two side-by-side op-eds and gave specific examples of each, where if you look at them very carefully, they're using the exact same phrases to describe the same things. And it's almost scary how much, I mean, you're almost thinking they should have worked a little harder to keep them different, right? I mean, maybe just, I don't know, throw them into ChatGPT and have them come up with different words. I think they just got lazy a little bit, but it sort of indicated to me that there is coordination in this messaging.
How much does this echo, and I asked you this in the dressing room earlier, how much does this echo, the foreign ministry briefings? Because we hear quite a lot there. The same kind of a nuancing. This has gone on for decades as well.
I just thought maybe you were trying to create a scandal by saying I was in your dressing room. But,
we were all there. The makeup room.
No, I mean, look, I spent 6 years in embassies. I am used to Chinese official, pronouncements on things. They tend to have a certain edge to them. Oftentimes we would say in fact, I mean, so look, just as an example, look at this whole kerfuffle all about the film down in New Zealand, where the Chinese embassy went out and tried to tell the Kiwis not to let the film be shown. Frankly, that's dumb, right? I mean, if you want everybody to forget about this little documentary, say nothing. Yeah. But they seem unable to do that. And I think the whole incentive structure around Chinese diplomats, Chinese military officers, is we should show we're as patriotic as possible at all times. So they have to say something, even when the best thing for them to have done would have been to say nothing and hopefully just let the film go along and sort of, not too popular. But now everybody's talking about it.
Well, Ray, we talked about ASEAN. I wanted to discuss and zoom in on the United States. There are longtime allies, and yet they've maintained this policy of strategic ambiguity for a long time now. Does it still serve its purpose of maintaining regional stability, or is it time for Washington to take a firmer stance when it comes to supporting the sovereignty of the Philippines?
How many times do we have to hear the ironclad?
Shoulder to shoulder.
I am not here to stand and give the U.S. diplomatic speech. I am no longer a government service. Look, I have argued that the United States should take a more concrete stand on the Philippines' behalf. The specific thing that I have argued that the U.S. should start with is I have argued for a medical civic action mission out to Pagasa. These things, we do these all the time. We go out, we take a C-130 transport aircraft, put a bunch of doctors and engineers on it, send them out, they fix up the school and the clinic, they pull teeth and check eyes and all those kinds of things, they treat disease. And it's a great way to show solidarity and concern. There is a civilian population out there, and at the same time say, and by the way, we are recognizing that the Philippines has administrative control over Pagasa. We don't even have to say, that the Philippines has sovereignty. I mean, I know that would be a big step. And the reason that nobody ever did that before was, remember I talked about it in the late 80s when nobody wanted to get into the whole who owns what rock thing, right? It was like, let's just everybody stay where they are. But we're not in that time anymore. What China has been doing has been so aggressive. And the people of Pagasa wake up every morning and stare across the water at a China Coast Guard ship and several dozen maritime militia. Very imposing right out there. They've got that big air and naval base at Subi Reef right on the other side. It's time for the United States to go out and say, we recognize the Philippines.
Why not?
Yeah, why do you reckon they haven't done anything?
I think a lot of it's inertia, right? I mean, there are people who have done this for a long time, and they tend to think, look, things are fine as they are. And what my argument is, actually, they're not fine.
The president will be meeting with our president and yours will be meeting soon, and surely this will be on the agenda.
I don't know. So I don't set their agenda.
Yeah, but I'm sure President Marcos will
The West Philippine
bring it
Sea
up.
will, of course, be on the agenda. Ray Powell's idea about Pagasa,
Marco
I
Rubio
would
is
like
going to
to
be in the meeting. So.
Well, you know, I mean, I think that they clearly will talk about the West Philippine Sea. That's what President Marcos talks about when he goes internationally, and why wouldn't he talk about the West Philippine Sea? It is the Philippines' #1 security concern, so of course they will.
What should he bring home?
Aside from a discount
A
on the tariff
17%.
deal.
Oh, yeah,
Below
of course,
7,
it's number
apart
one
from
on the agenda.
So, you know, actually, look, I think that what he ought to do is go and study the recent footage of Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington, D.C. He seems to be the Trump whisperer these days. Last term it was Shinzo Abe. This time it's Benjamin Netanyahu. There are ways to work with Donald Trump that work, and you know, he is a very unique person, and so it's good to study the tape of the people who do it well.
Great advice.
I know. I hope they're watching.
Thank you so much. It's always
you,
a
Seth.
pleasure to have you. That was maritime security expert Ray Powell.